my coffee and today's guests here with me, so we're ready to roll. I'm Michael Hanf, Executive Partner at Taival Advisory. Welcome to our Circular Coffee Break podcast, where we will be casually talking about everything circular and beyond. Now, today is a very special episode, as a couple of days ago, the World Circular Economy Forum 2023 took place here in Helsinki, which is basically bringing together hundreds of professionals from different organizations and companies to discuss about the state of circularity and to exchange ideas and experiences on how to accelerate progress towards a circular world. Now, we thought, why not bring together some of the participants of the event to casually discuss about their learnings, their findings, and what they actually took away from the World Circular Economic Forum. As always, we hope the podcast is interesting, insightful, and provides new perspectives for you. But if you have any feedback or improvement ideas or suggestions, please leave a comment or drop us a note at info@taival.com. So you heard correctly. This time we actually have 3 guests that are joining me for the show today. So first time that we have more than one guest. So really excited about that. We have Alisa Meek, the founder of Mixi Center and co-founder of the North Mix. We have Jaakko Nauha, Chief Commercial Officer at TraceGrow. And some of you will remember Jaakko from the first episode of the podcast a couple of months ago now. And we have Thomas Knuts, Sustainability Consultant at Losvik and Flen. So thanks a lot to all of you for joining me today on the podcast. To get us started, could you briefly introduce yourself and what led you to circularity and the World Circular Economic Forum specifically, so that our guests get to know you a little bit better? Alisa, if you go first.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So I'm Alisa Meek, and after many years working as a consultant and then as a co-founder in a tech startup, I decided to focus on circular economy after I had the pleasure to do a project with Citra. So I founded Mixi Center, which is focused on supporting circular solutions. We work mainly with startups, building an ecosystem that brings together companies, cities, and organizations. We are very action-oriented and facilitate collaborations with the goal of connecting the Finnish circular economy ecosystem with other countries. Mixi has partnered with the University of Helsinki to create a pre-incubation program called Circulator. And we even have the final event this Friday, so welcome to join us. We also organize different events, and one of them was a side event of the World Circular Economy Forum last week. It was focused on investing in circularity and sustainability. So this year was my first physical World Circular Economy Forum, and it was a great opportunity to meet current and future partners from other countries. Happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation.
Perfect. Thanks, Alisa. Jaakko, for those that haven't heard the first episode of the podcast.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And thanks for having me here. I'll try to be brief. I work at TraceGrow, and in a nutshell, we are a circular economy cleantech company. So we take industrial side streams and waste from smelters, or like the black mass from recycled alkaline batteries, and we turn those into basically fertilizers, micronutrients that support the plant's growth. And before joining TraceGrow roughly a year ago, I worked 9 years in Neste Corporation. And there, the last 3 years, I was working with algae. So it wasn't really circular, but it was renewable. So that was like the first step. And before that, I've been doing working with the process industry, process optimization, and training solutions that help to improve. So gradually going from improving a bit, creating something new, and then now closing the loop, so to say. Thanks.
Perfect. Interesting path. Thanks, Jaakko. Thomas.
Yes, thank you for the invitation. Since April this year, I'm working at a consultant agency, Losvik and Flen. We are a Nordic consultant agency trying to combine sustainability, communication, and leadership. And before I joined this ship, I worked for the regional development company Concordia in Jakobstad, Pietarsaari, where I tried to help mainly the manufacturing industry to start their circular journey, and that's also where I collaborated in a couple of projects with Michael and the Tyval team. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So now the World Circular Economic Forum is behind us with a lot of interesting and insightful sessions. There were side events, accelerator sessions. The main event took place. So a really large number of different sessions and presentations. From your point of view, what were your key takeaways? Is there anything specific that you found interesting, surprising, or maybe even shocking of what you heard, either in the presentations, in the events, or also in the one-to-one discussions that you were able to have? Reverse order this time. Thomas, if you want to start.
Yeah, first of all, I think it was a really high-class conference this year. The interest in circular economy seems to be really high right now. It's not just a nice to have thing anymore. It's an absolute must have that also many of the keynote speakers pointed out. So I feel that circular economy is a movement in a pretty good swing right now. Finally, it seems like everyone is looking into it right now, both big corporates, government, cities, and so on. So it's going really fast right now, and I think that's also really nice to follow. So yeah, that would maybe be my general comments so far.
Perfect. Thanks, Thomas. Alisa, what did you take away from the event in Mesokeskus?
Yeah, so first I think that we can see this shift from talking about circular economy to talking about regenerative economy and about nature-based solutions. So it was definitely evident in this event. So for example, there was this session about a more diverse role for forests, which I think was really, really interesting topic. And then another thing that was, I think, good to see is that there was focus on quite a lot of local initiatives. So I was attending sessions about circular economy in Africa, for example. And of course, last year it was already in Rwanda, in Kigali, the forum. So it was great also to see these kinds of topics in the event now. And finally, maybe one thing that I was happy to see is the topic of funding, because I'm working, as I mentioned, with startups. So it was great to see that this topic of funding, which is challenging, of course, for circular startups, it was mentioned in a few of the sessions.
And I think as an extension to that, also finance is becoming more and more of a topic. Sustainable finance, what finance in the context of circularity and all of that. So yeah, very, very good point. Jaakko, what did you learn? What were your key takeaways?
A little bit similar in a way. I guess the finance was something that did pop up, but then what I felt was really strong communicated in multiple events was that we need to act now. And it was positive to see that the finance was like also demanding that, but then few things that kept me wonder. One was the regulations. Like, is that moving fast enough to support the circular options and also guiding towards those? So a little bit like incentivizing or putting additional tools or like a carrot and a stick way. Another thing was basically on transformation. I was sitting on many of the mining sessions as well. And kind of after the whole event, I felt like, are the big companies that have all of their key assets tied into a linear business model, are they going to be able to transform it? And will their owners support it? Because in many industries, it doesn't look like that. And immediately started thinking about practicalities that typically the disruption comes from outside. And then when was it the last time I actually rented or bought a DVD or a Blu-ray? And not at least 5 years or so. Now it's all as a service, like these kind of streaming options. So are we going to be seeing like a similar that we have a Blockbuster that's a big big company on its own field, and then it doesn't go for the transformation, and then outside disruption comes and turns the whole thing around. And I think here maybe like ecosystems, etc., might work well. And then a third thing was in a way positive, but also kind of surprising that like there are, so to say, practicalities that other more advanced countries have done, and those have been adapted, etc., like waste fees, etc. So in a way, it was shocking to see that some of the countries are saying that they're starting to do things that some countries have already done in 40 years. But on the other side, the feedback was positive, and not all the countries, like when there's a will, now you can go faster and do the transformation in 5 years and faster steps and get a bigger impact. So I think the countries who have been working in this field more, they should share openly the positives and kind of show models based on their experience, what works and what not, so that others can join and move faster and actually get an impact now.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And I mean, what we've seen in digital is that a lot of countries have jumped several steps. So they didn't go through our traditional banking process, went to internet banking and then to mobile banking, but they jumped directly to that. So I hope we will see something similar in the circularity space and in the sustainability space, that some of the countries that start late will not first go through the very painful, slow steps that a lot of countries have gone through, but will really jump over these steps and use the learnings that other countries have made. And for that, an event like the World Circular Economic Forum is naturally very important. And it has always been a key event for people working in circularity to meet, talk, and exchange ideas. At the same time, I mean, you talked about ecosystems, but circularity basically means systemic change and a very broad change. And it requires a very broad spectrum of people. How do you feel about this year's event from that point of view? Were the right people in the room and were the right topics discussed? Were we able to burst the bubble a little bit of circularity experts talking with circularity experts and basically clapping each other on the shoulder how far we've got? Was there anything missing from your perspective? Any specific group or stakeholder that you think should have been there in your perspective?
Yeah, so I think it's following up on what Jakob just mentioned about the corporate. So I think that it's still, unfortunately, what you mentioned, Michael, that it's still a bit policymakers with policymakers, and I was missing the business sector there. So it was nice to see a few companies in the expo, but very few. Most of them were still public sector organizations. So I think that we need the system change, as was mentioned, and we need the business sector for that. So I really hope that in the future there will be much more present in the event. And also, it's important to talk about the success stories, but also about the barriers, the challenges, the failures that we have, and because we know that there are the challenges, of course.
Absolutely. And it's always nice to talk about the things that went right, but you mostly learn more from the things that went wrong in many cases. So yeah, fully agree. Thomas, what was your observation also having this municipal or based background? How do you see the mix of people that were present there and were engaged in the dialogue?
Yeah, I think this is a really important and great question. And I definitely feel that there's some kind of a paradox in this right now. When we're inside the bubble, inside Messokeskus, as I said earlier, I really felt that something is finally happening right now. But at the same time, when you entered the door and came outside and tried to again listen to what's going on in the society as in general, I think there's a huge gap. It's still a huge gap between those who knows what circular economy really means and also the opportunities, but also all the challenges, and the mass outside. So I really think, probably we are still living in a bubble, a circular bubble. We who are breathing and eating circular economy almost every day. But when you're coming outside on the streets and discussing with people in general, I think there's still a huge need of more education, more knowledge, more awareness of what circular economy really means and all the consequences and the crisis that we are actually living in right now. So I think it's a really important and good question. And as I said, I really like the atmosphere inside this time, but at the same time, it's different to come outside and live in the real world again. Yeah, I think that's huge challenges still.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about the urgency that was in the room there. Unfortunately, I don't necessarily always see the urgency when I walk along the street or talk to people outside of the bubble. So,
and just to, Michael, if I say that, I think that there is the bubble of circular economy, and there's also the bubble of the Nordic circular economy. So again, although I was happy to see use cases from other countries, I think that we can do much more to learn what is going on in other areas, and also to impact and to collaborate with other areas of the world.
Yeah, I fully agree. Jaco, do you see you mentioned the ecosystem already earlier as a key topic.
Yeah, I kind of maybe go a little bit back to the start. So I was happy to see like different finance representations and also associations, a lot of governmental groups and different kind of like invest in certain country or business incentives to basically attract. So kind of like a governmental business development groups in a way. But then exactly like it was mentioned, that I felt like that the industry sector was pretty much missing. And kind of wondering, like, does it happen the same way as like the slush event, that it started with startups and then over the years kind of ended up growing? And of course, next year, this is not necessarily in Finland, but maybe this can also grow so that the bigger companies are feeling that it's how should I say, more must to be involved instead of being left out. I'm kind of going in circles here, but the fact that the industry was missing brings me back on again that, okay, there were different like these sector depending sessions. Were good, but then I wonder, like, if I look at mining industry or fertilizer industry, that are the big players who could really move the needle there, are they ready to jump into this world? And are they ready to move from linear into a circular? And if ever, so I guess, there were some, for example, mining companies who were early adapters and showing how they're moving towards circularity and kind of minimizing waste. And I think that's where it starts. But somehow it felt like we're really far off from where we should be.
Now, in an earlier podcast episode, we talked about the fact that circularity, sustainability is more and more seen also as a competitive factor and a strategic factor for a lot of companies. And that is why the openness that was there earlier, also between chief sustainability officers, people that are engaged, might not be there anymore, because it's basically more competitive, it's more secretive. Just related to that, where do you see that coming from? That there is not that much representation from the industry there? Is it mainly that the topic hasn't been high on the agenda? Is it because companies don't want to talk about it because it's something they do internally and they see as a competitive advantage? Where do you feel that this is coming from? And do you have any ideas how we can change that next time when the World Circular Economic Forum is around, so that we have more of those people in the room?
My guess is that they haven't been invited. So, it's not a criticism on this, on the organizers, but just I think that it has been very much focused on the policymakers. So my thought is that maybe next year there should be in these 2 days of the conference, maybe the second day should be focused on the business sector, and then to bring the corporates, but also to bring the startups. So, for example, my friend was participating in one of the booths. She's the CEO of Neymar, and I asked how did she hear about this opportunity to even participate in the expo, and she just kind of heard about it and took the opportunity. But I think that many companies didn't even hear about it or didn't think it would be relevant for them. So I think in the same week we had also the Arctic 15 Startup Summit in Helsinki, and I think that the fact that they were overlapping in the same week means a lot. That there is this gap between these two worlds, of one of the policymakers in the World Circular Economy Forum, and the second of the business sector and the startups, and we should bring them together in future events. So yeah, just to invite them.
No, that's a very good point. That's a very good point, because I think there were 3 or 4 events in the same week, big events actually. So that naturally also takes attention away in that sense. And if you have the feeling it's mostly policymakers and discussion topics that interest policymakers, then it's naturally a question if I, as a business representative, want to be there, or if I rather go to Arctic or some other events there. Jaakko, Thomas, any ideas from your side how we can change that?
Maybe a little bit about the resonation. I kind of understood that it's, at least in our case, it was also invitation based. So there were certain sectors that had tickets and they were choosing who they want to invite there, etc. So I think that will affect. And in our case, we were representing like a small startup scenery in a sense in a process industry. So my feeling is that maybe the bigger ones are not getting invitations, or then exactly they have another place where they rather would be. Maybe another comment I want to mention: on Thursday there would have been on the mining side like a deep dive, and I got an invitation to join there at the event, but I had already been committed to give a talk on another Circularity in Cities event, so a little bit of overlapping. So I guess you might end up, if it's not well planned or kind of structured, you end up having multiple parallel sessions, and then you have to choose where you join.
Yeah, and I think in general, I'm not sure what your feeling is, but there's a lot of events, a lot of webinars, a lot of events. I mean, you could almost have an event on a daily basis if you wanted to, and not get any real work done. So I think that's naturally also impacting companies, participants, where they just have to prioritize. Do I spend 2 days in an event where I have the feeling that it's mostly talking and mostly talking about maybe even topics that are not so close to what I do at the moment? Or do I spend the time working in my company on these topics? So I think it's also a lack of time, focus on other topics and things like that. Now, the reduction of consumption is naturally one of the key building blocks to reach a more sustainable and more circular world. Now, in terms of the circularity model, we're talking about like the reduce and refuse part, where we basically go towards degrowth and we just consume less. I feel that this area is not as much featured that much in an event like the World Circular Economy Forum. It's more about how do we circularize, if you want, our current production, our current consumption, but not about how can we reduce what we consume in the first place. Do you have a similar observation? What is your feeling when it comes to topics like degrowth? Is this something you have been discussing and hearing about at the event? Thomas, maybe you.
You got good questions, Michael. This is another one. Well, I totally agree. There's a lot of buzz around this different kind of circular business models right now. But when will we start to discuss the enormous amounts of products we are producing? The world is only, was it 7.1% circular right now, and the number seems to decrease. So when will we dare to start asking ourselves if this product is really worth to produce? Do we really need to make another new red jacket? These kind of questions wasn't discussed so much in Helsinki this time, and not in the debate or in general. Of course, it's really, really difficult questions also for a company who are used to work in a linear model, and most of the companies are, in fact, still working linear. So I think it's a really big challenge, and a really important question also to start to think in new ways. And I think, again, I come back to education, awareness, knowledge. We need more education, and I think it was really inspiring also during Monday to listen to the last seminar where youth, the younger generation, discussed on the scene with Laila Jaralu about circular economy and how the younger generation could be involved, and also put some pressure on the linear models and the companies in the ways they are working right now, because I think that's where we find the solution among the younger generation also to get their way of thinking into the corporates.
I was just about to say that I think it was the only session during these 2 days that it was a bit like taking these degrowth ideas to the discussion. And I think that it comes from the younger generation, they are more bold, and they don't have any more the patience to hear these talks about we need a system change, we need to move from linear to circular. So I think we need to address these issues somehow in the next summit.
Yeah, and I think recently I read somewhere, and I'm sure I'm repeating this wrongly, but if we would stop producing clothing, textile today, we would still have enough textile and clothing to basically for the whole world for the next 10 years, even if no new clothing would be produced starting today. So I think there's a huge amount. At the same time, I agree with what you just said. I think the younger generation is a key here. And I think what I was missing a little bit, because it's the typical gray-haired senior leaders that are basically discussing in the panels about how the world is changing and how the transformation is happening. We're not necessarily involving the younger generation that might have a different perspective, that might basically be, as you said, Alisa, be more radical, be more willing to actually think differently, think out of the box, think out of the bubble in that context. If I look, for example, at my kids, they just today came back from a shopping spree where they basically went to all the different secondhand shops in the Helsinki city center, and they found all the cool things. And they were happy to find them at low prices and really unique pieces that you wouldn't find in a normal shop. If I think back, they're now 13 and 16. And if I think back then, for me, it was brand clothes. It had to be new. It was like, then, and that's the whole mindset change that is basically happening at the moment with the young generation. So I think it's about bringing that young generation into the discussion and basically have them ask the tough questions towards the panels in that context, because I'm sure they have a lot of tough questions that they will be asking in that context. Jakob.
Yeah, maybe kind of reflecting a little bit exactly what you said, because some of the thoughts that I made also on the event was that there was a lot of big pictures, big industries, big gray hair topics and executives and etc., but not much of a practical approaches. I mean, there were some use cases, etc., but not something that one could take in a everyday life in a way. Or what I'm trying to say here is that, for example, in Finland, there's this hiking company that does sell used secondhand. gear and clothing. And as a father of 3, I'm wondering, why don't we have the same for toys? First of all, why do we even need so many toys? We should ban all the TV commercials to begin with. That's my personal opinion. And then kind of just keep the ones that, how should I say, are lasting longer. Like we've got a lot of these different kind of wooden train tracks or then building blocks that are plastic, and we are maybe the 3rd users of those. And then once the time passes, we'll pass them on. But I'm just kind of as a food for thought after the event is that, like, could we have more these companies who sell and try to sell more and more? Could they have a parallel business model of platform where when you go there, you can bring your own stuff and they're actually utilizing the platform. Toy stores are known that you get toys from there, and one could bring their toys and they would be also selling secondhand toys and getting margin out of that, a little bit turning their linear business model into a circular. And it doesn't have to stop at the toy store. It goes throughout like very many different approaches. Could go for furnitures, whatnot. I mean, so because I guess that would be when in a world when you still kind of feel like you have to own everything by yourself and you're not like sharing yet, even though that's coming. But that would be like the first step to start just buying new stuff and being able to find it from where you go for the toys or furniture or whatever anyways.
I fully agree. A couple of episodes back, I had an interesting discussion with Timo Huftamiki from Emmy. And what he mentioned is that, and he before that was at Tori, and what he mentioned is that the knowledge of people that these platforms are out there and the willingness to use these platforms is not on the level that we might think of. And I think very often people like us, like the people at the World Circular Economic Forum, we're in a bubble. And to be honest, I mean, before, during, and after the World Circular Economic Forum, my LinkedIn feed was full with posts, with quotes, with pictures, with inspiring topics. But outside of that, the coverage in the, let's call it mainstream media, was not really there. I didn't see much of that in either the Finnish or the German or the English language media. And in general, I find very little about this in the mainstream media. I think Helsingin Sanomat has a couple of articles about it, but if you look at Talouselämä or some of the other print media, they are not really picking this up as much in that context. Now, from your point of view, do you have any thoughts or ideas why that might be? Why is the topic not that visible? Is it because people are not interested in it, or is it because the media are not picking it up? Is it not sexy enough, as digital and ChatGPT and AI is at the moment? What's your experience there?
I would say that the last thing you mentioned is probably, I think, the main thing, that it's not maybe sexy enough, and again, because repeating what I said before about the business sector, because they are not involved. So maybe there is still this idea that from the economical point of view, it's not important enough. So that's another reason why we need to bring them into this discussion, is to then it will be more interesting for also other parties. So that's my take on the question.
That makes sense.
Well, I think, as I also said earlier, we need some kind of new definition of what circular economy is, to also raise the awareness and try to find what's in it for us. I think it's still a very unknown term also for media, and I sometimes think about, is circular economy a rocket science, or are we making it too difficult for us? I mean, for example, for an SME, it's really tough right now to know where to start. You meet a lot of different terms and combinations of letters and trendy concepts. Where should you start? I don't really think we know what we're talking about. And then how should media write about these kinds of events if they doesn't really know what it means and where to start and how to find a focus on it? I think we need some kind of framework for circular economy that's easy to understand for everybody. It's not easy, but I think it will be really important to find.
But by the way, I think that this, what I mentioned in the beginning, the new terms like the regenerative economy, it makes even more complex. And then, okay, is it different for circular economy?
Absolutely.
Is it the same? Is it only like the new trend? So I definitely agree that the language is also a thing.
Yeah, and if you combine it with the sustainability theme, and you're talking about both environmental and social, and it's all but also nothing included in the terms when we're talking about sustainability and circular economy and regenerative business and so on. So yeah.
I would maybe fully agree, first of all, and kind of looking at, for example, plastics first. There was about the plastic straws in the EU, they should be banned, and then the plastic bags, and the straws probably don't move the needle, but they raise the awareness. And it was something that was easy to kind of relate, and okay, I can live without those, like that's fine. And then it has grown. So I think that we should have some practical examples, cases that people can relate to, understand, and showcases. So not something that country has made an environmental permit, but like more concrete for everyday life for everybody, so to say. And maybe even also like a reflection that, hey, I've now bought this secondhand or recycled this, and this is actually savings I made for the nature, or what's the impact? Find like a good reference, so to say.
Yeah. No, a really good point. It is a very abstract and complex topic. So it's difficult for people to grasp and to take forward and apply into their world. Fully agree. Cool. The coffee is empty, and it's time to wrap up this episode of the Circular Coffee Break. Thanks, Alisa, Jaakko, Thomas, for joining me today and reflecting a little bit on the World Circular Economy Forum. I guess we all agree that these events are extremely important to bring people together. And we just need to broaden the group of people that come together and broaden the topics and sharpen the topics in order to further accelerate the transition that we're looking at. Thanks a lot for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I hope everyone listening, you liked the episode and you got some new inspirations or ideas out of what we talked about. If you have any comments, as I mentioned earlier, ideas or suggestions, please let us know by leaving a comment on your favorite podcast platform or sending us a note at info@taival.com. Also, please remember to subscribe to stay in the loop on new episodes. There will be new episodes dropping every 2 weeks, also throughout the summer. There's a really long list of excellent guests coming up in the coming weeks, so don't miss out on those. And there's also a lot of back episodes that you can listen to if you haven't done that. Thanks a lot for listening. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you here at the Circular Coffee.